Hey, this is James, the founder of Sweetfish Media. If you've listened to B2B Growth for a while, you probably have an idea of what we're passionate about. Loving people really well, a constant pursuit of learning, and inspiring people to own their careers. With all the craziness happening with this virus, we are incredibly fortunate to be in the business of podcasting. So many B2B brands are looking for alternatives to their in-person events that are being canceled, and our business is growing as a result. Please don't mishear me on this, because I'm not saying this to brag. It is heartbreaking, the economic impact this is having on so many businesses. But being in the business of podcasting, the demand for what we do has increased. And because of that, we're looking to hire really talented people to help us serve that demand. So if you like what we're all about at Sweetfish and you're looking for a great career opportunity, hit us up. There's a link in the show notes where you can apply today. I'm really looking forward to meeting you.
Welcome back to B2B Growth. My name is Timmy Bauer, and I'm on the editorial team at Sweetfish. I'm joined today once again by Dylan Hay, the CEO of Hay Digital, and one of our B2B Growth contributors. Today is part 3 of our discussion on what SaaS companies need to know about PPC. If you missed 1 and 2, I highly suggest them. We talked about ad networks, quality score, keywords, budgets and bidding, and a lot more. I'm excited for today. We're going to dive into things like targeting, copywriting, and measurement. Dylan, how does it feel to be back?
Yeah, thank you for having me on for the third part of this mini series, if we call it that. I'm super excited about this episode. I'm keen to just go deep and share as much additional knowledge with people as I can. So yeah, ready for it.
Awesome. Now, if I remember correctly, the last thing we talked about was budgets and bidding, and I wanted to get into talking about targeting with you. So could you tell us about the different types of ad targeting and what types of targeting are most relevant for SaaS companies?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing I'll say to kind of get started on discussing targeting is, if anyone listening to this hasn't listened to the first 2 parts of this series, they should listen to those, because we talk a lot about how, specifically with SaaS companies, when you're running PPC and paid advertising, you want to make sure that you're adjusting the experience and the ads that you're serving to people based on, I use the term funnel positioning a lot. So whether someone's kind of top of funnel, mid funnel, bottom of funnel, you have to make sure everything is tailored to searchers' intent. And that really ties into how you target your ads, right? Because with Google, especially on the PPC, like search ad side of things, we're targeting people based on what they're searching. So that's the kind of main component of how we target people. However, what I can do right now is share a few tips about some other bits and pieces that you can do to implement into your targeting that people sometimes miss when we're taking a look into ads accounts, specifically for SaaS and B2B technology companies as well. So there's a few things I would recommend. First of all is, if you're running display campaigns, any Google display campaigns, these are very good for top of funnel awareness driven content and ads. And a lot of SaaS companies don't go down this route for some reason. They don't run display campaigns. So I'd really recommend setting up display campaigns. Very cheap to get in front of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. But the reason most people don't use them is because often the quality can be fairly low if you're not very stringent with the targeting. So what you can do, a couple of campaigns that we always recommend, is you can do similar to on Facebook, where you can create custom audiences. You can kind of do something similar on Google. So you could plug in, for example, into Google, you could create a custom intent audience, is what it's called. And you could give Google a list of the URLs or the domain names of your, let's say, top 5 competitors, or however many competitors that you have. And you could say to Google, hey, we want to target display ads to people who are similar to people who have been on these websites. So this is one quick tip that you can implement. But whenever you're running display campaigns, you want to make sure that you're as tight as possible with the targeting. So other things you can do is do some testing, but you'll probably see a lot of traffic will come from mobile on display. And often that's not the highest quality, because for most SaaS companies to make a purchasing decision, often you're not going to do that on your mobile. So you can run some tests with stopping mobile for a couple of weeks, seeing if that edits things or adjusts things. You can also do what's called, in a similar kind of structure, you can actually upload lists to your Google Ads account, or you can use your Google Analytics data and you could feed in information to Google which shows it your, let's say, current customers. So that could be anyone that's been in the dashboard of your SaaS platform, for example. You could give that list to Google and say, hey, we want to target people similar to these with our display campaigns. So those are a couple of targeting things you can try in your display campaigns. I'm happy to, if anyone has questions on that, they can reach out to me or connect with me, however they want to do that. And then the other thing is with your search campaigns, Google has this thing that's been around for a couple of years now, where you can take a look at in-market audiences, they call them. So basically, you can layer in different audiences to your ads campaigns and just observe them. And these are audiences that Google defines. So for example, Google has so much data on all of us. It knows if we're potentially in the market for business software or enterprise software. It knows if we've been looking at high value retail items. It knows if we're traveling. Like, it has all of this information, and Google puts these people into what it thinks as the right in-market audiences. So what we usually do with all of our customers is we'll add in a load of in-market audiences, and you can just do searching for things and Google will suggest them to you as well. And we'll layer those in and we'll just set them into observation mode to begin with. So it won't adjust any of our campaigns, but Google will break down the data for us and say, okay, if, for example, we're seeing more clicks from people within the enterprise software audience, like, you can see that kind of data, and then you can start to add it into your targeting instead of just observing it. So this is a good way we found, especially within the SaaS space. Often it's things like people shopping for enterprise software. The click-through rates will be better and the cost will be lower. And if you add that into your targeting, that can also really help. So those are a few ways that you can be testing with other kind of targeting methods outside of what we talked about in the previous 2 episodes.
Dylan, those were some awesome suggestions. So switching gears a little bit, we know that copywriting is a critical component of PPC. What's your best advice for SaaS companies as it relates to PPC copywriting? And can you share a few examples of high-performing copy that you've seen SaaS companies use for their ads?
Yeah, great question. So we touched a little bit earlier on in the previous, maybe episode 1 or episode 2, a little bit about the importance of copywriting, as you say, and how this can really play a big part into getting your ads right and getting the best results possible. And I shared a few tips around making sure that your ad copy is extremely relevant to the searcher's intent. So if somebody is searching for something really bottom of funnel, like a buying intent keyword, maybe they're searching for your name versus a competitor name, for example, you want to make sure that the ad copy tailors to that intent. Whereas if someone's searching for something very top of funnel, you have to be aware of that and maybe go down a more educational kind of route. Now, with that in mind, I can share a few other tips and tricks that you can use to improve your ad copy. As a kind of side note to this, we do have a blog post on our website. So Hey Digital, if you search for Hey Digital PPC ad copy, it should be the first thing you find. And there's maybe 12, 15 different tips. But just to recap a couple of these, because I think these are some of the most powerful ones that are very, very simple to introduce to. So one thing, I would make sure that you start to include as much social proof or areas of credibility as you can within your ad copy. So consumers trust other consumers more than brands, right? So they're going to trust other people's reviews, testimonials more than you speaking directly. Of course, it's hard to show exactly somebody else's review within an ad copy, but what you can do is you can use some site links, and we'll talk about those later on, to link to your case studies page or your testimonials page. You can make sure you're using social copy within the ads itself, like social proof copy within the ads itself. So it could be things like, our customers earned over $100 million with the help of our software, or serving more than 10,000 satisfied customers, or something like that. Maybe number 1 rated software, like these kind of things. So I would really make sure you include those, because even though it sounds very simple, those are the kind of things that can often make you stand out from some of the other ads that you might see that other people might be running. Another tip is to really talk to the searcher. This ties in a little bit with what we were saying earlier about tailoring your copy to the searcher's intent, but actually talking to them like you would do another human being, rather than trying to structure something like a boring piece of content or a typical ad that you see everywhere else. Someone that does a really good example of this is, there's a company called Optio, and that's like a Google AdWords management platform. They help you like maybe spot things that the human eye might miss sometimes. And I'm actually looking at one of their ads right now, and the headline of the ad is manage Google Ads accounts, ? It's like asking you, hey, do you manage Google Ads accounts? And then the second headline is shave hours off your workload. So things like that, really talking to the person that you're serving the ad to, is another thing that you can do. But then you can also start to, as you're depending on the kind of size company that you are listening to this, if you're, let's say, more focused on the enterprise market, convince somebody to get onto a sales call with you, or a demo call, discovery call, however you want to position it with you and your team. You want to try your best to qualify out any leads who would be too small. And it's fairly easy to do that sometimes from the offset. Like if you're an enterprise system, maybe mention enterprise software systems in your headline or in your ad copy. If you only serve companies with over 100 employees, maybe you could say something like best for companies with over 100 employees, things like that. You want to try and qualify out the wrong kind of leads or prospects if you can. And there's a good way to do that just by being transparent in your ad copy. And then just one other tip that I would use, we talked about this previously, but really dive deep onto using emotional triggers. So empathizing with your customers in the ad copy, using things like instant gratification. You could say, hey, get the success that you deserve, loss aversion, save X% each month, like these kind of things. So yeah, those would be a few tips. I have maybe 10, 12 other ones. So make sure you go ahead and check those out on our blog post, or get in contact with me if you need any support with that kind of stuff.
That's awesome. One of the things I love about that, Dylan, is like they're basically human qualities, understanding that consumers trust other consumers, talking to the searcher like they're a human, being transparent, empathizing with them. I love to hear that these human qualities are the winning strategies.
Yeah, but often the problem is because if you're running hundreds of different ads against hundreds of different or even thousands of different search terms, and you're maybe a small marketing team, you have one person who's looking after PPC and they're looking after so many other marketing activities. These are the things that get missed unless you have someone that's able to dedicate a lot of their time to the ads account and constantly make these kind of tweaks. And I know it sounds like really simple stuff, but actually it's stuff that, as you said, it's just human nature, right? But a lot of people miss this when they're creating their ad copy, and not just ad copy, even landing pages and just general blog posts, etc. Like, unfortunately, that's one of the problems within the kind of B2B and SaaS software world, is that we seem to push things out at volume rather than just actually being human and using quality, and that's reflective within ads as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. All right, let's talk about ad extensions and ad formats. What do SaaS companies need to understand about ad extensions, and what do they need to understand about ad formats?
Yeah, so this is probably only going to be interesting to people who are actually going to be hands-on managing accounts themselves. So just bear that in mind. If some people listening to this think this sounds boring, it might be to you, but it's very important stuff to cover. Basically, Google has a variety of different ad extensions. And essentially, ad extensions are just ways for you to help try and drive more, like higher click-through rates and more awareness for your brand, because it means if you start to use different ad extensions, your ad will take up more real estate within the Google search. If you were to just use like headline and description and no extensions, like the person that uses extensions is going to have an extra piece in their box in their ad, and they're going to take up more space than you. So Google encourages you to use these things to drive better click-through rates, improve quality scores, which we know if you're like pushing towards all the metrics that Google likes to see, they think your ads are better, and then you're going to get lower conversion costs, etc. There are lots of different types of extensions. So everything from site link extensions to call extensions, message extensions, structured snippet, pricing. There's loads of different ones. And if you want to read like what they all are, you can just search for it. And there's a really useful article on the Google support website that explains all of them. Specifically for SaaS companies, though, the ones that we use most often are actually site link extensions. So these are extensions that are actually clickable, and they go through to a section on your website. So for example, ones we use most frequently are site link extensions to the pricing page. So then it will come up and say like something about the pricing. There'll be a little mini description about the pricing, and you can click on that button and it'll take you straight to the pricing page. You might want to do that for case studies as well. And maybe even like if you're focused on demo bookings, you might want to have it going to the demo booking landing page that you have. So site link extensions are super useful because it just gives someone another place to click on if they're not just interested in going to the landing page that you have set up on the homepage. It gives them an easy route to get elsewhere. So that's one thing. The other one that I would say is fairly useful, well, both of these actually, call out extensions and structured snippet extensions. These are the ones that we use the most outside of these site links. So basically with call out extensions, you can use these to just try and drive a little bit more engagement through to your site. So it can be things like, these aren't clickable by the way, but there'll be things like maybe no obligation demo or like free 14-day trial. They're just like some key terms that are going to drive a bit more interest in what you're showing. And I would say that you should always really be trying to use extensions in most of the ads that you're running because it just takes up more real estate and you want to do that. But make sure that your call out extensions try and meet the messaging in your text ad, because you don't want an ad that's all about like free trial extensions are all about driving demo bookings, for example. That's something that can often happen. And again, you want to make sure that experience for the searcher is as smooth as possible. So those would be a few things to look at and check out. The most kind of popular ones that we use for SaaS companies specifically. And you might want to use things like we can use like app extensions and message extensions and call extensions, but really those aren't necessarily the most relevant to SaaS companies. So yeah, those would be the core ones I would focus on for everyone listening to this at the moment.
Awesome. Now, we have got to talk about measurement, Dylan. I'm really excited to get into this. What are key performance indicators that SaaS companies should be tracking? And for each of those KPIs, what should SaaS companies be aiming for?
Yeah, really good question. So there's no straight answer for this because there's no straight answer for which KPIs should we be aiming for, because everyone is going to have different things based on their lifetime value of customers, sales cycles, conversion rates, etc. But when it comes to setting KPIs across an ads account, what we, as an agency at Hey Digital, all we really care about is driving additional revenue for the companies that we work with. And the way that happens is often through driving extra trial signups, extra demos being booked, and then following those throughout the funnel and seeing what kind of impact that has. Now, a lot of people will set KPIs around things like quality scores, click-through rates, conversion volume. These things are important within managing an ads account. But to see business results, you really want to be focusing your KPIs on the things that are driving the business forward. And just being honest, yes, click-through rates and quality scores are important for the person managing the ads account, but they're not important for the CEO or the CMO of the company that's listening to this. So you always want to be focusing on the metrics that drive the business forward. So demos booked, trial signups, paying customers if that's possible, and those kind of the core areas that you should be taking a look at. Now, a couple of things to note that people often miss is that, especially within SaaS, so with the buying cycle not being so smooth, you're not going to search for something one time and then the first time see it. Like you're not going to search something, click on an ad, and then purchase immediately. There will be some people that do that, but often people need between 8 and 12 different interactions with the brand before they're ready to make a purchasing decision or sign up for a trial. So one thing that you'll see is when you're running ads, you'll notice often, pretty much we see this with all of our customers, is that when we're running ads, we see within our customers' Google Analytics account, there will also be an increase in direct conversions when we're running ads. So this is people that aren't necessarily being attributed as a result of the ads, but we come to the hypothesis that people are seeing our ads, they remember our name, and then they come directly to our website the next time or in the future. There's no 100% solid way of proving that all the way through, but we see this a lot. So I did, on my own podcast, I interviewed someone recently who said they wanted to run a test and they stopped all of their Facebook advertising for a month to see what kind of impact it would have. And actually, it had a huge impact on their direct conversions. And it makes sense, right? So that's one metric I would look at when you're starting to run ads as a SaaS company, is take a look at, as you're spending more on ads, as the testing and ad spend is increasing, you want to make sure that your direct conversions are increasing as well, because that's really important. If they're not, then it probably means you're not doing something right with the ads, because you want people to be remembering you and coming back directly to the site in the future. So that would be one thing to note, that I think a lot of agencies, when working with SaaS companies, if they haven't done so before, they kind of forget about how the buying process is different within SaaS versus, let's say, an e-commerce business where I might search for a pair of sneakers and then buy them immediately. This is just very different. So yeah, those would be the KPIs that I would really be focusing on for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned that there's no real way to measure strictly the number of people that are going to you just because they have seen enough of the ads that they're fully aware of you. Is there a way to really get a good sense of whether or not that's working?
Yeah, so we can measure parts of it. It's difficult to attribute it directly. So, for example, like, it all comes down to how marketing teams decide on their attribution models as well, because some people will say, okay, we'll attribute the conversion, the sign up, the demo booking to wherever they came from before they booked the demo. But what if they've been on your website 15 times? One time was because of a Facebook ad. One time was because they searched your name directly. One time was a YouTube remarketing ad that they saw. And then the time when they finally sign up, they came direct to the website. In those cases, like, what, as a marketer, how do you define which channel owns that conversion? And there is no channel that owns it. This is where marketing in general has to come together and say, hey, look, this is all of our channels working together. People struggle with that. And it's like, that's a conversation that we could talk about for a really long time. Like maybe that could be another episode. But there was a tip that I shared on one of my podcasts. There's a plugin called GA Connector, and it's a connector plugin for Google Analytics that connects Google Analytics with your CRM system. And that helped one of the companies I interviewed on my podcast called LearnWorlds. They were able to identify up to 20% more direct conversions and see that they'd come from ads in the past. So that's maybe one little thing that you could look at. But unfortunately, there isn't like a super simple answer to track absolutely everything in some use cases when there are multiple touch points involved, and it depends on how you decide to attribute things across your team as well.
Awesome. I really appreciate your expertise on this, Dylan. And with an expert like you, it would be a mistake to not ask you if you could give our listeners a rundown of some common mistakes you see SaaS companies making when it comes to their PPC efforts.
For sure. So I think listening through these 3 episodes, I touch on a lot of mistakes that people make. The core ones that we see a lot of the time are not tailoring your ads to the searcher's intent. This is something that's really, really big and really key. The other thing is like not segmenting campaigns enough. So people will just create a branded campaign and then a non-branded campaign. We talked about that in the first episode. The other things will be like people running ads, but not being specific enough with their targeting. So they'll set up remarketing ads, but they'll forget that they've left audience expansion turned on. So actually the ad isn't just remarketing. It's then saying to Google, hey, we want to cover people similar to these people. So then it's not truly remarketing. I would say another mistake is not trying to bring all of the channels together. You have to be aware that Google has an impact on Facebook. Facebook has an impact on Google. Organic content has an impact on that as well. And I guess those would be a few core things. There's tons of mistakes I could cover, like segmenting by country. A lot of people won't do that. So yeah, there's quite a long list. But I think if someone was to listen through to these 3 episodes, they would pick up on a lot of those and be in a really strong position moving forward. And if anyone has any specific questions as well, I'm happy for them to reach out to me and do my best to help out.
Awesome. And do you have any recommendations for SaaS marketers that are listening for who they could be following to learn more about PPC?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I saw that in our notes before the podcast and I was really trying to think about who to recommend. And to be honest with you, it's very, very difficult. There's tons of SaaS marketers that I would recommend following, but there's not really, like, of course, there's agencies focused on SaaS marketing and SaaS PPC like me and my team. But there's really not that many of us. And a lot of the agencies that are focused on SaaS, they have either never worked in SaaS before or something like that. And people aren't necessarily pushing their like personal brands as much as I am. So I don't really have a ton of people that I would recommend to follow. The only other agency that I know focus specifically on SaaS that are actually really credible, and I have no problem sharing them. I know some people might think it's weird, like kind of pointing someone to our competition almost, but there's an agency called Powered by Search. I know that they've worked with some SaaS companies as well. They don't just do PPC though; they do like full service marketing. So to be completely honest, I really do believe that we're one of the few SaaS only PPC agencies out there. And I know there are others, but I don't think anyone is as good as we are. So yeah, it's kind of difficult to share that. I would say though, general SaaS marketers who I really love to follow, people that you guys have had on the show before as well. I think like someone should just run through and listen to a few B2B Growth episodes. But yeah, that would be like kind of my recommendation. It's hard to actually say, okay, this person is specifically SaaS PPC. There's very few of them out there.
Well, it's definitely not hard for me to agree with you on that, Dylan. And also, I personally think that it only adds to a person's credibility when they're able to point to other experts that might even be, competition for them. So I think that's awesome. Could you close things out by sharing the number one thing that you want listeners to walk away with after hearing this episode?
Yeah, good question. So I want anyone listening to this to not be scared of trying PPC for your SaaS business, but to also be aware that if you're going to do it, you have to dedicate time and resources to it. Too often we see SaaS companies that will run what they think is an experiment and they'll expect results within the first week or two. And if they don't see results, then they'll cut everything and decide that PPC doesn't work for them as a channel. These platforms, whether it's Google, Capterra, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever you're advertising on, these platforms thrive off of data, and you need to be collecting data before you can even begin to make any optimizations. And you need to really know what you're doing. I think if you listen through to these 3 episodes, it will put you in good stead to actually be able to make a start. But yeah, my recommendation and what I want someone to take away from this is to really, if you are going to do it, like commit some time to doing it and doing it properly. And then really make sure that everything you're doing is trying to be as human as possible and really focus on that element, instead of just like putting ad copy out there for the sake of putting ad copy out there. Like you really want to tailor the experience to the person that's searching. I've used that term like quite a few times throughout these interviews, is making sure you're tailoring everything to the searcher's intent. And those are the ways that you're going to see the best performance from your campaign. So yeah, I would like to say to everyone, try it out, give it a go, but stick with it for some time. And again, as I've said, if people have questions or anything like that, I'm more than happy to answer them for you.
Well, thank you, Dylan. And thank you to everyone listening to this series of B2B Growth. Again, we've been talking to Dylan Hay, CEO of Hey Digital. Dylan is really active on LinkedIn, so you should definitely connect with him there. Just search Dylan Hay and he'll pop right up.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I hate it when podcasts incessantly ask their listeners for reviews, but I get why they do it, because reviews are enormously helpful when you're trying to grow a podcast audience. So here's what we decided to do. If you leave a review for B2B Growth in Apple Podcasts and email me a screenshot of the review to james@sweetfishmedia.com, I'll send you a signed copy of my new book, Content-Based Networking, How to Instantly Connect with Anyone You Want to Know. We get a review, you get a free book. We both win.